Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining our session today. It really is an exciting time for e-commerce and for digital shopping. There's a lot of things happening, there's a lot of growth. I think it's somewhat intimidating for implementers to implement all of that. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit through the landscape, the industry, and what we've seen happening in the market and where we think it can go and how you can take advantage of this. My name is Gerard Oosthuizen. I'm CTO at Intersect, and we work with a lot of banks in South Africa, but also globally and in Europe, where the strongest regulations are in place to create a better checkout experience while reducing friction and remaining compliant. The reality is checkout's been broken for a long while. Merchants hate the word 3D secure. Issuers are frustrated with all the regulations being imposed on them, and ultimately the consumer suffers. So let's look at some of that journey. We have to start on a positive note, however. Ultimately, e-commerce is booming today, and we're seeing a lot of growth in the market. You know, and it's even just being worse because I'm not standing on a stage in Sandton in front of you. I'm actually sitting at home in Cape Town presenting to you. COVID has changed the world we live in. You know, there's a constant stream of deliveries to our house that I have to pick up while working. It's a new world, and a lot of people have embraced it. We've certainly increased our e-commerce spending, but a lot of new entrants are also shopping for the first time, and that's really exciting. You know, even before COVID, there was a prediction that that we'd see 91% growth in e-commerce. A lot of new industries are going through tipping points where people are moving from physical retail to digital, and as they see the success, it's just accelerating. I mean, who would have thought that 6 months ago even that we would be shopping groceries and getting it delivered to our door within the hour? I mean, unimaginable, but real today. The reality is that COVID has increased the numbers. This is some of our statistics from some of our consolidated South African clients, and it shows you that e-commerce has really increased with the lockdown. Coinciding with our lockdown, we're seeing a 40% increase. The reality is once somebody's become comfortable with the platform, they'll stay. I remember a number of years ago, we had a business banking app at one of our customers, and every December as the business would go on leave, they still had to manage their business affairs, they would install and download the app and start using it. January comes around and they're still using those apps. They don't regress to their older platforms. They've seen it work, they've experienced it, and they feel safe in using it. And I think the same is going to be true. So this looks awesome. Why are we saying there's a problem? The reality is that today, user experience is not what it should be. There's a large number of abandonment happening. And of that abandonment where the shopping doesn't happen, sometimes the user says, no, I didn't want to buy those shoes. But in 65% of the cases, he still wants to buy those shoes, but his SMS doesn't come through, or he doesn't know what to do, or he's being asked a value to enter and he doesn't know what it is. Hundreds of billions of sales are being lost because of friction, because of pain. And that's why such a lot of frustration exists in the ecosystem. With growth, however, comes challenges and comes fraud, and we're seeing a lot of growth happening, a lot of movement of fraud towards e-commerce, 80% more likely to occur there now. And of course, because there's a lot more people moving there, there's a lot of people that are unfamiliar with that experience and can be called and assisted to do the checkout and money being stolen from it. A lot of unfamiliarity, but it's also a lot safer for the attacker because he can sit probably also in lockdown somewhere in his home and perpetrate the act. He doesn't have to go into the physical retail store and use a fake or a stolen card and a fake PIN to perpetrate the act. And there's a lot of techniques that's emerged, like triangulation, where I can basically order stuff off Amazon and have it delivered to somebody else, and I've sold it on eBay. So ultimately, a lot of fraud happening where I don't have to physically even receive the goods. I can just on-sell it, and somebody else receives the stolen goods directly, and I make some money out of it. So obviously, people are applying different techniques to prevent the fraud. The US, I think, style is saying let fraud be insured away or add margin. I'm not just going to affect fraud, prevent the user. The European principle probably is, let's add more friction. Let's prevent the lockdown. If you get the fraud right, even these machine learning risk engines, or you get the physical challenges wrong, there's still a customer at the end that wants to shop that sometimes is prevented from shopping. $146 billion in card not present purchases are being declined every day. That would be a good sign if all of that was actually fraudulent, but we're doing quite badly. More than half of them are actually legitimate users wanting to purchase transactions, but the order is being declined. They want to go to that concert, but the machine says no. And there's no way for them to actually tell the bank or the merchant that it is really me. No way for them to step up and to take action to let it go through. They're just sitting there frustrated, and they take out their another card and they use that. And then they stay. 62% of cardholders will abandon a declined card, and a lot of them will never go back. So it's not just that transaction that's being lost. The merchant might still get it, but the issuer has lost that cardholder on e-commerce. And you know, other stats that haven't been shared says more than 80% of people will then go and tell another person about that experience. And that means that your brand suffers as well. So we need to get this right. And why can't we get it right? I think there's sort of a common view of what's required for this. Elegant user experiences, people are able to transact anytime, anywhere, on any device. You know, a really slick user engagement. You know, like we get from Facebook, and we get from Apple, and we get from other popular apps. Why can banks not get? Let's take a bit of the landscape to see if we can try to form a picture. The browser landscape dominated by Chrome, which is available on most platforms. Safari, of course, on Mac OS and iPhones are dominant because of their platforms. Firefox has got a real loyal following of people that wants to have an independent browser and have an alternative to these big behemoths that is controlling the browser experience. Then there's a myriad of others. A number of the bigger ones are Chinese browsers, or Chinese organizations from the Asian Pacific region. But there's others like Opera, Samsung, Brave browser, Microsoft Edge, and they're in the mix there as well. So you have to consider for that. The reality, though, is that there's really only 3 browsers that remain. And it actually gets quite interesting. If you use Microsoft Edge and you've got a recently upgraded Windows version 10, you're actually using Chrome underneath. It's actually Chromium browser. Microsoft ceased working on their own browser engine end of last year. If you're using Chrome on iOS, actually it's Safari underneath. But while there might be different twists and turns in the picture, 95% of the time, 90% of the market can be covered by Chrome, Safari, Chromium, Safari, and Firefox. So that's a good sign, I think. Ultimately, if we look at the mobile operating systems, Microsoft Windows is away, Apple and Google dominate, and their operating systems are used dominantly. There's a number of alternatives coming out, Kaizen, Akai OS, Tizen, and even Huawei is having to break a little bit away from Android. But a lot of them are really small, and in the case of Huawei, it's still really just Android underneath. In the case of the desktops, it's also really simple picture these days. We've got the Mac, and we've got Microsoft Windows, and really, again, 3 basic brands there, with 2 of them sort of also playing in the browser space. So there's actually potential consolidation. And that means that you can probably roll out to a large number of users if you do new things right. Where are the challenges? One of them is regulatory based and customer perception based. GDPR and POPI is the South African version. GDPR is the European version of privacy protection. And there's a lot of movement because people's privacy has been violated. The whole sharing of information and the hacking has meant that people need to take more control, and regulators are stepping up. And that's a serious consideration when you're implementing a solution, that you're not doing the wrong thing there. So you have to be careful. PCI DSS, the way a large number of card payments work, is that you have to get the transaction going well and processing in a secure way. And that means that you can't just pass anything everywhere. You have to be cautious. And that's a good thing, but it does make implementations more complex. And then PSD2, the European Payment Services Directive number 2, a lot of regions are looking at that, and that's coming into force, has come into force partly, and the second part is coming into effect this year. And what that says is that a bank must open up via APIs for account information to be retrieved and for payments to be made by anybody. Anybody that registers themselves as a third-party provider, they have to go through some hoops, but then they can perform and get this action. So that's going to create a massive influx of competition, but also a lot more of confusion potentially in the checkout space as payments are being done. They did put some protections in place. They say you must use strong consumer authentication. You must protect the customer. You must make sure that you do two-factor authentication, a possession factor, and either a knowledge or a biometric factor as a second factor. So that must be done. The merchant or the account provider, the owner of the money for the customer, that person must do the consent. They can delegate it, but they're accountable. It must be done. They can do risk-based authentication in some cases, but they have to step up in at least 20% of the cases. With that comes some challenges on the browser space. Some of the techniques that's being worked is under threat, and all of the browsers are stepping up. The economics of the internet is based on advertisements. Ultimately, you're marketing to the customer, and they want to track you across various sites. And each of these browsers have actually got programs dedicated to prevent you being tracked. Now, that's great for us from a privacy as a consumer perspective, but a lot of the techniques being used today to make checkout better or aiming to make checkout better actually depends on this browser fingerprinting as well. The reality is that's falling away. Fortunately for us, in the banking space, that's been the case on mobile apps for a while now. And that's why we've come up with various techniques. But it's great to see that this privacy concept is now coming to the web as well and is being actively rolled out. So a lot of people are trying to solve the problem somewhat independently, but let's look at some of these people trying to get e-commerce. EMVCO is the association that the card associations like Visa and MasterCard look towards to define new standards that can create info. They've got a number of standards like QR codes and NFC and everything. They've got 3 that sort of fits into the remote payment world. The one is tokenization, that speaks to getting rid of physical card numbers in e-commerce and replacing it with a token. The next one is 3D Secure. 3D Secure is the authentication mechanism for payments, the way in which payments are consented and PSD2 compliant and for SCA, etc. The third new kid on the block is Click to Pay. Click to Pay, also called Secure Remote Commerce, is actually EMVCO's attempt at getting e-commerce standardized. So let's look at each one quickly. Tokenization replaces the card with a token, and that token is really only used in certain use cases. If it's a token issued to Netflix, that token can be stolen, but you can still just use it to make Netflix purchases. And it's form preserving, so the card associations, the networks and the merchants and the acquirers don't have to make that much changes to support it, but ultimately the physical cards are being removed from the system. It does create opportunity to create a better experience because you can now see all your cards that's been issued to various parties. I've got 7 tokens issued, and you can change them, remove, delete, and even activate and issue to new merchants. They come in largely 3 factors. The one is an issuer wallet, where you're actually taking a banking app and using that to pay. Again, you can tap NFC, but you can also use it for digital payments. The second form factor that we're more familiar with, I think in South Africa, for example, is a third-party wallet. So that would be Samsung Pay, Fitbit, Garmin, and Apple Pay, where the issuer actually issues that token into a card. And therefore, the restriction is it can only be used from that mobile phone or from that hardware device, and things must be stored on that device. And then card on file, which is more the e-commerce tokenization, where it means that you can see the different cards in process. 3D Secure, as I mentioned, this is the authentication vehicle. 3D Secure 1 is the one that gave checkout the bad rep, started in 2004, really built for the previous generation. 3D Secure 2 is being rolled out now, and a number of you as issuers will be busy with projects getting 3D Secure 2 going. And it supports a whole bunch of new ways to interact with your consumer. Gone are static pins, out-of-band authentication. They've got things like you can use 3D Secure for non-payment related stuff to confirm customer presence, like when you're issuing tokens. You can use it in a decoupled flow way that you're actually, as a merchant, processing, and then there's a decoupled processing, and really being rolled out to improve the experience. Big focus of this is actually risk-based flow based on browser fingerprinting. So they actually have support for completely frictionless flows, which is a great opportunity for us to improve. Then the last one, click to pay or secure remote commerce. It's actually a new brand. That logo to the top right is a brand that EMVCo has launched and that the card associations are now rolling out. It's already launched last year in the US. It's now coming to more markets like South Africa. And this is an ecosystem that's created for payments, where you've got things like a digital card facilitator and an SRC participating issuer and an SRC implementer and an SRC system, all working in cohorts to create a better experience. And there's two options for the merchant that wants to use it. They can, if they're a large merchant, create their own experience, or they can choose to use one of MasterCard Visa standard experiences. And then the system will go out and find your list of wallets or list of cards that you've loaded into this ecosystem. Again, there's a process for you to register for this thing and for you to be able to load cards. But can we make that easier? And ultimately, this will be the new brand that replaces card entry. But for now, it'll just be another logo in your checkout experience. And you have to consider where and how you will put that in. So that's EMVCo. Let's look at others. The other one that I wanted to perhaps mention today is FIDO. Fast Identity Online, started in 2030 already. Intersect is one of the original guys. In fact, we were one of the first that certified in FIDO in 2013 already. But probably not only because of us, but a large number of groups have joined. Microsoft, Google, Apple has recently joined, Amazon, Facebook, and a number have used it for employee authentication. But it is now actually rolling out into a more mainstream use case. And with Apple's announcement at Worldwide Development Conference last year that they'll, earlier this year, that they'll in the next version fully support FIDO, I think it's a great element to add into the mix. Firstly, it talks about two ways of getting a customer. So the first is user validation, originally used to prevent a user from being from being phished, because it means that you have to tap something on the device to prove you're there. User verification is the newer way. It's based on the FIDO2 standard, and that allows you to do two-factor authentication with a camera, with biometric, as well as the possession. And it uses cryptographic signing to in a good way, be able to prove that the user was there. And it's supported in two form factors. The one is FIDO authenticators, like the ones I've got here, which actually are external things. You put it on a keychain and you can use it and plug it into any device. You can use NFC or Bluetooth. The other mechanism is platform authenticators, and that's the one that's exciting. Google started it first. All Android ends can now do FIDO, whether you know it or not. It's enabled. Windows Hello with Windows 10 supports it as well. And Apple has now announced platform support from later this year for all their new devices, for all the devices that upgrade. So older devices can still use it. My iPhone 6 supports FIDO. So ultimately, great new technique in the arsenal. And then the last one that I wanted to talk through is the internet. The people that control the standards for the internet is called the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. And they set the standards, and all the browsers participate, and the community like Intersect and others participate in these forums. And we help set new standards. And one of them that's exciting is there's actually a focus group on payments. And their goal, make checkout. So they've got payment requests, APIs that's already being adopted in most browsers that allows you to create a controlled checkout experience with the payment handler. If you look at the picture there, you'll see a native pop-up where you can select your cards in. That's native control. And on that Android phone, you'll see a a Chrome pop-up for a minimal UI, which again is controlled by the browser and facilitated, a controlled facilitation between the issuer and the merchant that wants to participate. And it supports everything, not just card payments. Payment handlers can be installed, so we can actually install a payment handler for a bank that will control the experience for the bank. There's varied levels of adoption here. Chrome has full support for it, so you've got 75% of the market, but Firefox is actively working on getting it in. We're hoping in this year still. And then Safari, you never know. They actually have payment request working, but not yet payment handlers, and they're using it in a limited way. So we'll see when these others join how they participate in this mix. So I've talked about a number of things. How do they all fit together? How do you take advantage of them? And do they all fit together well? Have the people that work together put them together? The unfortunate reality is that they were all built largely independently. And only recently have we seen people starting to collaborate and work together. So there's some overlap. There's some views of who should do what still. But a number of these are being talked about. The one that's really done well is Fido. And they've actually gotten all the browsers to implement, all the dominant browsers to implement a protocol called WebAuthn, which makes Fido authenticators available on browsers. And with platform authenticators, you can now from a browser activate biometric and device pins and get cryptographic from within the browser. So that's great collaboration between the internet folks and the Fido folks. There's also the Fido folks and EMVCo. The latest release of 3D Secure 2, 2.2 that's been published, 2.3 is busy reviewed, actually supports Fido as an authentication mechanism and actually has specific fields for Fido and specific values you can say, I have authenticated with Fido. And they've worked with the European associations to say Fido is good enough for strong consumer authentication. And we're seeing the first remnants of all three working together. And last year, it was actually at a WPWG conference in Fukuoka, Japan. We all actually had the first meeting where these three different groups got together and could share, and where EMVCo could hear about what the browsers are doing on browser fingerprinting and how would they adjust to it, and Fido trying to do it. And there's really a number of interesting activities between these groups trying to say, how can we work together to make this better? It's still not there though, it's still a while away and standards take time. So how can these building blocks enable exciting new journeys? How can we put it together? Because I think while they're not all yet synergized across, there's good enough experiences across all of them if you put it together and you act smartly. So let's look at how that would happen. Firstly, let's just acknowledge that a good experience, all of them have tried to create a good experience from there. This is 3D Secure 2. Here I am checking out, and ultimately there's a way in which the phone can break out to, the e-commerce can break out to the phone and authenticate the transaction and complete. And we've already done this, and it's still already in the market. This is still a much better experience than having to wait for an OTP to be sent or having to create other type of dances for it. And once you've interacted on the browser, we can, because we've seen a certain amount of, we've seen that EDT site, we can actually put some of the cryptography there, and the next time you can actually check out without friction if required. So you can have a great experience in this. In the same way, push provisioning. So tokenization says you must load the card in. And a lot of us are loading Samsung cards in by scanning the card in the front. And then it gets loaded in from Samsung, and then you get an SMS OTP, and then you've got the card active. But push provisioning is actually built into the standard. So you can actually go, and once you've just registered your banking, you can get an option to add a card into the token. And we can, in the background, take that card and push it to the third-party wallet and immediately install it on your app. So right there, you've got your Samsung, your Apple Pay going without needing to do any specific jumps just from your banking app. And it's using, obviously, a number of pieces of technology to put that together, but the consumer just sees a great experience. But let's look at what we can do in the proper checkout experience. Here's a secure login. So yes, you've gotten into your banking app, you've securely logged in, and nothing new here. You've done two-factor authentications, you've already authenticated the user, and he's logged in with his browser fingerprint. What if we offered you to enable a faster checkout experience, right? And a consumer would choose this, and we would actually take the banking app and flip into the browser. At this stage, we can do a number of things. The first thing, we ask you to register your browser, your fingerprint in the browser. We're establishing a FIDO authenticator here. As far as the user is concerned, the transaction's now been completed. Go back to your banking app. But behind the scenes, we've actually installed a payment handler. We've enabled FIDO, and we've enabled this for 3D Secure, a great 3D Secure web experience from within this browser. So we've done a number of things to prepare the transaction. I think preparing is great. And then the next thing, when we're doing a card experience, here we are checking out with the card, and still 3D Secure. The merchant didn't have to do anything. But when you place the order, we open up an EDT bank site, a banking site is activated because of 3D Secure. What we then do is we use 3D Secure and the site we have to kick off a payment handler. That payment handler is used to kick off a FIDO authenticator. An authenticated transaction. All the consumer sees is verify your identity. And once that's done, transaction's done. So you've basically just seen as a consumer, enter my card details, put my fingerprint down to confirm the transaction, and I'm done. But it's using a number of these techniques in a very smart way. When we're looking at pay by bank, there's ultimately an identity that could be installed. This is a merchant that therefore has taken the right step to implement. Here I'm placing the order, and it actually looks up the identity of the user because we've hooked that into the browser, and it can give you the card details. And again, that same experience, kicking off a payment handler. That window is a payment handler, so we're controlling it. And then we're able to authenticate with biometric. The transaction's done. The consumer didn't have to enter card details or payment details or anything else. It's all just conveniently completed for him. Lots of magic happening behind the scene, but the experience is slick. I just say pay by bank, select my card, put my fingerprint, and I'm done, all from within my banking app. And this can be done on the browser, on your PC now, as well as on your phone. Great user experiences. So what does this mean? It means that there's a lot of things happening. A lot of people are working. So you can innovate. There's exciting things to do. The reality is a lot of people don't know about it. A lot of people don't understand how to do it. And a lot of people will get it wrong. This means there's a great opportunity for you to differentiate and become a loyal brand. As we've seen, there's lots of people moving away from brands because of frustration. You could be the one they stick. And then lastly, collaboration. There's a lot of people working on this, and not everybody can be experts on anything. So use partners that knows the space and focus on this space to help advise you and give you pointers on what the right techniques are and what will fit your use cases space. I want to say thank you very much for your time. Stay safe. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me in this conference, or please feel free to reach out to Intersect if you want to know. Thank you very much.